Somewhere right now there is an ordinary family home. A couch, a router blinking in the corner, a normal internet bill paid every month, and quietly, through that router, traffic is flowing out that nobody in the house knows anything about. A stranger on the other side of the world is loading websites, checking sneaker drops, scraping prices, signing up for accounts. And to every one of those sites, it looks exactly like a real person sitting on that family's couch. The family has no idea. They never will, unless something goes wrong. That house is what the industry calls an exit node. And today we are going to follow the wire all the way back, from the website that trusts that connection to the supply chain that quietly turned a stranger's home into a doorway. What a residential proxy actually is. Let us start with the thing itself. A proxy is just a middleman for your internet traffic. Instead of your request going straight to a website, it goes to the proxy first, and the proxy passes it along, so the website sees the proxy's address instead of yours. That part is simple and old. The interesting word is residential. A residential proxy is one whose address belongs to a real home internet connection, handed out by a normal consumer internet provider to a normal household. That is the whole magic, and it is worth sitting with for a second. You are not borrowing some server in a data center. You are borrowing an actual home. Why a home address looks so trustworthy? Websites do not treat all addresses equally. Addresses that belong to data centers are easy to spot because the blocks they live in are publicly labeled as commercial hosting, and almost no real customers browse from inside a server farm. So traffic from a data center carries a quiet note that says probably automated, treat with suspicion. A home connection carries the opposite note. It says, here is a real household, a real customer, a real person who pays a real bill. That reputation is the entire product. When someone buys a residential proxy, what they are really buying is the trust that a website extends almost automatically to traffic that appears to come from somebody's living room. It is a borrowed reputation built up by an innocent family over years of ordinary browsing, and quietly rented out to a stranger for a few minutes at a time. The address has done nothing wrong, which is exactly why it works. So where do these addresses come from? This is the question almost nobody asks, and it is the heart of the whole thing. These companies are selling access to millions of real home connections all over the world. They do not own those homes. They did not run a cable to any of them. So how does a proxy company end up able to route a stranger's traffic through your router? The answer is that somewhere, on some device inside that home, a piece of software is running that agreed to let it happen. The entire industry rests on that one quiet fact, and the rest of this video is about how that software gets there. The SDK hidden inside a free app. The most common path looks completely innocent. A developer builds a small free app, a flashlight, a wallpaper changer, a simple game, a file converter. Building and running an app costs money, and a free app earns nothing directly. So a company comes along and offers that developer a deal. Bundle our little piece of code, our software development kit, into your app, and we will pay you for every device that installs it. That code is the SDK, and once it is inside the app and running on a phone, it can quietly use that phone's connection as an exit node for someone else's traffic. The user downloaded a flashlight. They also, without ever feeling it, became part of a global proxy network, and the appeal to the developer is real. They get paid per install whether the user ever opens the app again or not, which turns a free download into a tiny recurring source of income. The incentive points one direction for everyone in the chain except the person whose connection is being used. Nobody in that loop is paid to make the arrangement clear to them, the consent buried in the fine print. Now here is where it gets careful, because technically, in most cases, the user did agree. When you install one of these apps, you tap through a wall of terms, and somewhere in that wall there is usually a line. It might say, the app uses your device to support its free service, or that you allow your bandwidth and network resources to be shared, or some softer phrasing that means the same thing. Legally, that line is often enough. Practically, almost nobody reads it, almost nobody understands it, and almost nobody would agree to it if it were written in one plain sentence on the install screen. So the consent exists, but it is consent in name. The gap between what was technically agreed and what was actually understood is where this entire business lives. Extensions and free VPNs do the same trick. It is not just phone apps. Browser extensions can carry the same kind of code, which means the browser you trust to be your private window can itself be quietly relaying other people's traffic in the background. And there is a particularly sharp irony in the free VPN corner. People install a free VPN precisely because they want privacy and protection. But running a VPN for millions of users is expensive, and some free ones pay for themselves by doing the exact opposite of what the user expected, turning those users into exit nodes and selling that access on. The tool you install to hide your traffic becomes the tool that carries a stranger's traffic out through your name. The spectrum from clean to murky. It would be unfair to paint the entire industry one color, because there is a real spectrum here. At the clean end are paid panels. These are networks where people knowingly sign up, are told clearly that their connection will be used, and are paid for it, sometimes in cash, sometimes in app credits, or a premium feature unlocked in return. That is genuine, informed, compensated consent, and there is nothing hidden about it. A person on a clean panel can usually see that they joined, can see roughly what is being used, and can turn it off and walk away whenever they like. At the murky end is the buried bundled consent we just walked through, where the agreement is technically present but practically invisible. And in between sits a wide gray zone of disclosures that are real but vague, payments that go to a developer the user never thinks about, and chains of resellers where the original source of an address gets harder and harder to trace. The further a customer is from the original household, the easier it becomes to not ask the uncomfortable question, and the structure is arranged so that nobody in the middle ever has to. The supply chain nobody sees. Follow the money, and it becomes a layered supply chain. At the bottom is the host, the real person whose connection is being used. Above them is the app or the extension or the VPN that planted the code. Above that is the company that makes the SDK and aggregates millions of these devices into a network. Above that are brokers and resellers who package that network into a clean product with a dashboard and a price list. And at the very top is the customer who just wants reliable home addresses and rarely asks where they came from. Each layer adds a little distance, and by the time the product is sold, the living room at the bottom is completely out of sight. How sites fight back anyway? So the addresses look perfect. Does that mean the websites lose? Not really, and this is the part that keeps the whole thing in tension. Detection has moved past simply asking whether an address looks residential. Defenders watch reputation, because even a genuine home address builds a history, and an address that suddenly serves thousands of strange requests starts to look wrong no matter what label it carries. They watch volume, because a real household does not generate the traffic of a small business through a single line. And they watch behavior, because the way automated traffic moves and clicks and fills forms rarely matches the messy rhythm of an actual person. A perfect address is only the first signal, and it is rarely the one that decides things. Volume is the giveaway. Volume deserves its own moment, because it is the simplest and most stubborn tell. A single home connection has a natural shape to its day. Somebody wakes up, checks a few things, goes quiet, comes back in the evening, streams something, sleeps. When a proxy network pushes the traffic of dozens of paying customers through that one address, the shape breaks. Requests arrive around the clock, for unrelated services, at a rate no household would ever produce. Defenders do not need to know the address is a proxy to act on this. They just need to notice that one living room is suddenly behaving like a data center wearing a home's clothes. And the harder a network works to look human, the more it has to spread itself thin, rotating across many homes so no single one stands out. That spreading is itself a pattern, because the same handful of accounts hopping from one residential address to another, all behaving identically, tells its own story to anyone watching the wider view rather than the single connection. The host barely notices a thing. From inside the home, almost nothing seems to happen. The code is built to be quiet. It tends to wait for the device to be idle and on Wi-Fi. Then it sips a little bandwidth in the background, sending and receiving on someone else's behalf, on a modern connection that is easy to miss. Maybe the data bill ticks up a little. Maybe a phone runs slightly warmer or drains a touch faster overnight. but none of it screams for attention. That quietness is a feature, not an accident. A network of exit nodes only stays useful for as long as the people hosting it never feel the need to look closer. The risk to the unwitting host: now turn the whole thing around and stand in the family's living room, because they carry a real cost they never agreed to. When a stranger's traffic flows out through your connection, it goes out under your address and your name. If that traffic does something abusive, scraping aggressively, attacking a login page, committing fraud, the trail leads back to your home first. Your address can end up on block lists, so sites you actually use start treating you as suspicious. In rare cases, the activity can draw far more serious attention. The host did nothing wrong by any normal measure. They installed a flashlight. But the consequences land on the connection, and the connection has their name on it. The ethics of consent you cannot feel. This is the ethical knot at the center of the whole subject. Consent that is technically given but practically invisible is a strange kind of consent. The host is not a victim in the legal sense, because somewhere they tapped agree, but they are not a willing participant in any honest sense either, because no one explained, in words they would actually read, that their home would become a doorway for strangers. The industry leans on that gap, and it leans hard. The clean end proves the model can be honest. The existence of a clean end is exactly what makes the murky end so hard to defend, because it shows informed consent was always possible and was simply skipped. A single plain sentence on the install screen, "Your connection will carry other people's traffic," would change almost everything, and the fact that it is so rarely there tells you most of what you need to know about who the arrangement is designed to serve. Someone is always the exit node, so step back and look at the whole shape of it. Every time traffic appears to come from a real home really is involved. The trust those addresses carry is real, the people whose connections carry that trust are real, and most of them have no idea they are part of it. The supply chain is built to keep it that way, layer by layer, until the living room at the bottom disappears from view. There is no traffic without an exit, and there is no exit without a node, and the node is almost always a stranger who tapped agree on something they never really read. If this is the kind of thing you want to understand from the inside, subscribe and follow the rabbit hole with us. We take the systems that quietly run the modern web and pull them apart one at a time. No products, no pitch, just the machinery. Next time we follow the views. How a video can rack up thousands of plays that no human ever watched. How that fake attention is manufactured at scale. And how the platforms learn to tell a real viewer from a paid ghost. That is the bot view economy. How fake views are made and caught. And it is the next door down the hall.